Concern about inflation led to government efforts to control it, which in turn now has people worried about tipping our economy and others into recession. These are complicated times, but perhaps also an opportunity for those who see a path to reform the global economic order. Joseph Stiglitz is a Nobel Prize-winning economist, professor at Columbia University, and the author most recently of People, Power and Profits: Progressive Capitalism for an Age of Discontent. And Joseph Stiglitz joins us now from Manhattan Island in New York City, and it's great to have you back on our program. How are you doing, sir?
It's great to be here.
I wonder if I can start by taking you back to your days growing up in Gary, Indiana, in a steel town. And I wonder if you could characterize the kind of capitalism you grew up with back then with what we have today.
Well, it was supposed to be the golden age of capitalism, but when I was growing up, it didn't feel that way. What I saw was enormous levels of inequality, racial discrimination, labor market turbulence, economic fluctuations, recessions. So it didn't seem so golden.
It didn't seem so golden, but relatively speaking, in terms of income inequality and so on, was it better then than what we have now?
It was much better than it is now. Things, I don't think anybody envisioned how worse things would go in the last 40 years.
For example, corporate CEOs made on average what times the average industrial wage then compared to today?
I can't remember exact number, but it was like 30, 40. Now it's like 270, 300. It's been multiplied by a factor of 10. That's just one example. If you look at a chart showing what's happened to the top 1% over the last 40 years, they've done very, very well. But if you look at a chart which shows what's happened to the bottom 90%, not the bottom 10 or 20, but the bottom 90%, you need a microscope to see progress.
Okay, let me follow up on that. I can understand why it's been a beautiful thing for those in the top 1% to be making so much more money today than they did back when you were living in Gary, Indiana. Why is it bad for the rest of us?
Well, that stagnation has manifested itself in many ways. You know, life expectancy, which especially as you get older, you start focusing on those kinds of issues. Life expectancy has been in decline, and that was true even before the pandemic. There are many aspects of this kind of inequality. It's not only inequality in income, inequality in wealth is twice that of income, but an essential part of America has been the American dream, some notion of equality of opportunity. And strikingly, if you look at recent data, the life prospects of a young American are more dependent on the income and education of his parents than in almost any other advanced country.
I just heard you use the expression, the 1%. Am I right in saying that you coined that? You were the first guy to use that expression, were you not?
Well, it's not that unusual of an expression, so I don't want to say I should have a copyright. I think what I did was in my Vanity Fair paper and article in 2011, which was titled "Of the 1%, for the 1%, by the 1%." I think it gave resonance to this idea of the 1%.
Now, if in Canada, if you're part of the 1%, you're making $200,000 a year. Is that to say Canada is a more egalitarian, progressive, preferable, if you like, society than the United States?
Well, it's certainly more egalitarian. And I think the direction that your democracy has been going is much better than the direction that American democracy has been going, which gives me lots of sources of concern.
Well, let's follow up on that then, because you do offer a new remedy in this new book of yours. You call it progressive capitalism. What does that entail?
Well, it entails the notion of progress, that we can advance. It entails the notion of capitalism, which means in a large modern economy, you can't have central planning, you can't have central control, you have to have some degree of decentralization. But I want to emphasize the other words in the title of my book, people. It's a kind of capitalism that puts people first, that says the economy is intended to serve the people rather than the people serve the economy. It recognizes unfettered capitalism can wind up with a concentration of power, and that power leads to profits, but those profits are not necessarily directed at enhancing societal well-being.
Some people have noted that the word capitalism is still in your prescription for what ails us, and they are intrigued by that because I guess they weren't sure that you were actually sold on capitalism. The fact that it's there, what do we infer from that?
Well, it's precisely the point I made. Markets are an important instrument for advancing well-being, but they have to be regulated. Every sport has to have rules and referees, and the market economy is a very rough sport, and you need to have rules and referees. For instance, you have to protect the environment, you have to protect workers, you have to protect consumers. And we see in the United States over and over again what happens when you don't have adequate protection. We have the opioid crisis, we have the childhood diabetes crisis, we have a problem of climate change, excess pollution. So what I'm calling for is, let's use the power of the market. Let's make sure that the power of the market is directed at enhancing societal well-being.
Well, the trick, of course, is to figure out how to get from here to there. What are your suggestions on that front? How do we build a more progressive capitalism?
Well, democracy is going to be an essential part of that. And that's why many of my ideas are related to what in Europe they call social democracy. I think if you ask most people, what do they want? What do they care about? They want education for their children. They want to make sure they have an adequate retirement. They want a job with dignity, with decent pay. They don't want monopolies taking advantage of them. They want to be able to be their environment to be protected. They want to be able to breathe clean air and drink clean water. So if you look then what people want, if we have a democracy that is actually working, it should deliver what people want. It should deliver the kind of economy that corresponds to what people want. And I believe progressive capitalism is exactly what people want.
A lot of this is marketing, of course. And by that, I mean, if you say socialism, a lot of people's noses get out of joint. If you say social democracy, it's a somewhat different thing. Can you help us understand the distinction between the two, if in fact there is one?
Well, 19th century and early 20th century socialism was about the ownership of the means of production. You think of the Soviet Union, the government had central planning, everything was run by the government. Progressive capitalism is very different from that. As I've said before, it's about enterprise, entrepreneurship, innovation, but it's about making sure that all these enterprises work within a set of rules that make sure that what they do advances broader interest. And by the way, I should also point out that an essential part of the idea of progressive capitalism is what I call a rich ecology of institutions, a wide variety of institutions. For instance, I teach at Columbia University. America is often recognized one of the strongest sets of institutions are our universities. And a very large fraction of those universities are neither state-owned, none of them are for-profit. And they are nonprofit institutions, they are foundations, and they play a very important role in our society. Cooperatives are also very important. People don't realize how important cooperatives are in America, but the only part of our financial institutions that function well in the years before and after the financial crisis were our financial cooperatives, which are called credit unions. So we actually have much more complex set of institutional arrangement than just for-profit firms and government. And all of these need to be part of what I call progressive capitalism.
Out of curiosity, would you say that China of today is a progressive capitalist society?
No. It's authoritarian. It doesn't have this kind of dynamic ecology of various institutions. It has resisted the creation of NGOs. In many ways, it's the antithesis of progressive capitalism.
Okay, in which case, if a skeptic were going to look at your book and come away saying, this guy simply wants too much regulation, too much of the rules of the game as he just described them, in order to create the kind of economy that would be progressively capitalistic for enough people, what would you counter with?
Well, I would first say that we've always had rules. We need to protect the environment. If we don't do that, we have no choice, but we have to live within our planetary boundaries. And if you don't squash monopolies, you won't wind up with a kind of innovation that's at the heart of a successful economy. The reason that we have higher standards of living today than we did 250 years ago is precisely the mix of private and public and NGO that I describe in progressive capitalism. It's because of innovation. And part of innovation, most important part, is basic research, which is financed by government. But so is the private sector important. And so it's really this whole pattern that I've described that has been at the core of the success that we've had over the last 250 years.
Well, let's look at some of the components of what this progressive capitalism might entail. For example, on tax policy, generally speaking, what would you want to do?
I want to have progressive taxation. I'd want the corporations to pay their fair share. There not to be all the tax evasion and avoidance that we see today. Basic principles of social justice would say that somebody who is a coupon clipper shouldn't pay lower taxes as a percentage of his income than somebody who works hard for a living. And this is not a revolutionary idea. Warren Buffett said it was unconscionable that he's paying a smaller percentage of his taxes than his secretary.
No, that's fair enough, but I do remember a couple of election campaigns ago in this country that the leader of the Social Democratic Party at the time said it gets confiscatory when personal income tax rates get up over 50%. Do you share his view?
The exact number is one that economists have debated. The most recent research in economics suggests that when you balance out the benefits of more egalitarian taxes with the cost of more progressive taxes, the view that is emerging within the economics profession is that taxes of 70% at the margin, at very top levels, are probably desirable. But that may depend on the precise circumstances of the country. These things are contingent on many different variables. I don't think there's anything magic about the number 50%. And as our societies change, the importance of public goods like research, education, health have increased, and that may necessitate increasing tax rates.
Okay, how about this? A couple of moments ago, you told us that you clearly did not think that China was an example of a progressive capitalistic country. Are there any countries around the world that you think are doing it the way you think it ought to be done?
Well, there's no one who exactly follows my prescription, but there are a number of countries that have adopted important parts of this. New Zealand, for instance, managed the COVID-19 extraordinarily well and has incorporated in their budgeting notions of well-being, concerns about deprivation. Norway and some of the other Scandinavian countries have adopted many of the precepts that I've advocated, very concerned about protecting the environment and investing in their people. And I think that's part of the reason that they've had success in their standards of living. It is very interesting studies that look at well-being, standards of income, however you measure it, show countries like Norway being really significantly higher than the United States.
Professor Stiglitz, in our last couple of minutes here, you know that the International Monetary Fund, in a recent forecast, says the worst is yet to come, and for many people, 2023 is going to feel like a recession. We got midterm elections coming up south of the border here in your country. The next Congress is going to be tasked with figuring out how to make sure that doesn't happen. What do they need to do?
Well, what worries me the most is that the Federal Reserve is going to raise interest rates too high and too fast, causing an unnecessarily deep and prolonged economic downturn. We don't know for sure because obviously they look at things month by month, but every indication is that is what they are going to do because of a misreading of the economic circumstances. The inflation we have today is by and large caused by supply side disturbances, not an excess of aggregate demand. And you're not going to get more oil, more food. You're not going to solve the chips problem, the automobile industry, by raising interest rates. But what you can do by raising interest rates is cause a severe economic slowdown. And so, when you're a central banker, raising interest rates is the tool you have. There's the old joke about if you're a carpenter, that you have a hammer and everything you do is with the hammer. I'm afraid central banks are the same way. The danger is that they are even counterproductive, because what we need to alleviate these supply side constraints is more investment. And higher interest rates make that more difficult.
We are happy to remind people of your latest contribution on these and other issues: people, power, and profits, progressive capitalism for an age of discontent. And we're delighted that it's brought Professor Joseph Stiglitz from Columbia University to our program tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.